Hello and welcome everyone. We're going to give it a few minutes to ensure that everybody else has been able to join in and we'll get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, I'm Michael Tobolsky, Vice President of Member Development at WeConnect International. Welcome to today's webinar, Developing Supplier Diversity and Inclusion Efforts in Europe. We're delighted that you have joined us for what promises to be an engaging and insightful panel discussion, sharing best practices and guidance to begin, grow, and develop sustainable supplier diversity efforts in Europe. This regional webinar is the first of several, and if you enjoy this, please also join us on July 23rd for an overview of supplier diversity and inclusion in the Asia Pacific region. Information, including registration, is on our website's event calendar at WeConnect International. For today's webinar, Brittany on our team will be handling the logistics. If you have questions you would like the panel to address, please type them in the Q&A boxes on GoToWebinar's control panel at the right-hand side of your screen, which can be expanded using the white arrow at the top left corner. And now, I would like to introduce you to Maggie Berry, the Executive Director for WeConnect International in Europe and the moderator for today's panel discussion. Maggie?
Thank you so much, Michael, and hello everybody and welcome for joining us today. So I'm joined today by 4 experienced and very passionate subject matter experts who are all driving the development of supplier diversity practices within their organizations. So please join me in welcoming Peter Zerp, Supplier and Inclusion and Diversity at Accenture, Selena McCall, Global Sustainable Procurement and Supply Chain Manager at Goldman Sachs, Megan Stowe, who is the Greater European Region Strategic Sourcing Director and International Supplier Diversity Manager at Intel, and Timo Worrell, Director, Supplier Social Responsibility at Johnson & Johnson. Thank you to all 4 of you for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with us. By way of a short introduction, supplier diversity is the proactive sourcing of products and services from previously underutilized suppliers. And these suppliers include businesses that are majority owned by women, ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, veterans, those who are LGBTQ+, and social enterprises. Supplier diversity is not about positive discrimination, political correctness, or favouring one group above another, but it's about opening up business opportunities to the widest possible pool of talented suppliers. WeConnect International is a corporate-led non-profit specifically championing the inclusion of women-owned businesses in global value chains. And we know that globally, women influence 85% of consumer purchasing decisions, yet on average, only 1% of corporate and government spend globally goes to women-owned businesses. And we are on a mission to change that 1%. We work with an amazing coalition of around 100 multinational organizations, including the firms on our panel today, to help them build and grow their supplier diversity programs and to connect them with more women-owned businesses who could be potential future suppliers. Sadly, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on global economy and on local communities. So now is very much the time for governments and corporations to work together to diversify supply chains to help mitigate future shocks to both local and global economies. The increased adoption of active supplier diversity inclusion programs in Europe will help to minimise future disruptions within value chains, and it's a win-win for buyers and for the women-owned suppliers around the world who are ready to step up to meet this demand and to deliver value for money. So thank you to you all for joining us today. You will be able to ask questions using the chat functionality, as Michael said, and you can also contact the WeConnect International team afterwards if there's any additional information that you would like. So to start, I'm going to ask you to our panelists to share a brief overview of your supplier diversity and inclusion efforts here, specifically in Europe. When they started, what do they look like, and how they've been growing? Meg, I'm gonna start with you. Would you like to share a bit of an overview, a brief overview of Intel's program?
Sure, thanks, Maggie. So Intel in the US, we've actually done supplier diversity for many, many years. And I always use the date of my youngest child of when we started internationally, because I came back from maternity leave and started doing it. So 10 years ago, Intel actually went out into the international world. It was probably just over 10 years ago. And we started in 3 countries. We chose India, UK, and South Africa. And the reasons we chose those countries was in India, we had a very passionate president of India, Intel India, who really got behind this program. The UK, I was based here, Maggie's based here, and we've got large spend here. And then South Africa, they've got the BEEE program there as well. So we started in those countries, and we've grown over those years, 10 years now, coming up for 10 years, into 22 countries globally, with country leads and champions actively working in each of those countries to pull in the diverse suppliers. We really look at our senior management to help us endorse and drive these in country, because I believe that if you have that senior management on site pushing down, it definitely helps you. And we also look at where we have the money. So it's pointless going into a country and saying, yay, we've got supplier diversity and we have $10,000 to spend there. So we follow the money, really. So that's a little bit about our program.
Fantastic, thank you, Meg. And Timo, what about from a J&J perspective? How have you been starting your program, or how did you start your program in the Europe region?
Great, no, thanks a lot, Maggie. Yeah, I mean, so I guess first of all, we've been doing supply diversity as an organisation, but very heavily US centric now for, I think we're coming up to 22 years this year that our program's been live in the US. So I think this has been very much top of the agenda in the US due to, I guess, the legislative landscape in the US. Of course, we don't necessarily benefit from that legislation outside of the US. So the program is a little bit more in its, I guess I wouldn't say infancy. We're a little bit beyond that, but outside the US, we started partnering with WeConnect in 2011. I think when we started our relationship in Europe. So today we're really focusing in on 3 areas of supply diversity. That's women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and that's only in countries though where a definition of minority exists, but also with social enterprises. I'd say a bit like Meg, we go where the money is, where the spend is, where we've got procurement resources that can support the program, but also where there is legislative landscape in place. So countries like South Africa is a really good example, countries where we can be successful. But I'd also say from a business perspective, we look at where legislation exists, where there is a business need for doing this, where there's a drive from our enterprise to, so for instance, support a piece of policy or legislation from a government in a particular country. Because of course, as an organisation, we're big suppliers into healthcare systems around the world. So making sure that our supply diversity program is aligned to the interests of our primary stakeholders is very important to us.
Fantastic, thank you, Timo. And Selena, can you share any insight from Goldman's around the journey that you're on around building out your efforts here in this region?
Thanks, Maggie. So the Goldman Sachs Vendor Diversity Programme actually started, like everybody else's in North America, back in 2000, and then it came into EMEA in 2005 and then went to APAC in 2009. But my role looking at a sustainable supply chain was created at the end of 2016. And so it's my responsibility to think about how we can drive both a responsible and an inclusive supply chain, and hence the strategic focus since then on vendor diversity. We decided that we would retain our global focus because our strategic sourcing team operates on a global base. So someone who's in London could be buying goods and services on behalf of, our Americas offices or indeed our APAC offices and vice versa. And we wanted to create the same set of guidelines for the team to broadly apply to our sourcing endeavours across the world. Our largest European offices, obviously London is our largest office, so the majority of the sourcing is in EMEA is for London, but we have offices in Frankfurt, Paris, Warsaw, and in other European cities as well. as mentioned, we try to keep the approach simple. So diverse vendors being defined by their ownership structure, 51% majority owned by, 51% owned by a minority, or MSMEs, micro, small, medium-sized enterprises, and then keep the guidance simple for the strategic sourcing team or for anyone who's buying on behalf of the firm. So that guidance being, you need to consider small and diverse businesses as part of your sourcing strategy, and we will partner with you to help you find potential vendors when you need to buy goods and services on behalf of the firm.
Fantastic. And I'm going to come back to your comment about your role being created a couple of years ago in an actual. Peter, would you like to share a high-level overview around Extensors Programme, which is obviously in multiple countries around the world?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Maggie, and thanks so much for having us here in this panel today. So yes, like the others, our program started in the US as well, of course, I think around 2003, 2004. And we decided to go global in 2009, first in Canada and in the UK. And we were also one of the co-founders of WeConnect International around the same time. And we were actually there when WeConnect Europe was born and when it was still WeConnect UK. So we go back a long way. So we started in Canada and the UK for Europe. The reason, yeah, I guess what the others say as well, follow the money. So for us, it's very important to look at, where does Accenture have a presence? Where can we make the most impact? Where do we have a good supply chain? And also where do we have people on the ground, like our procurement folks or internal stakeholders that want to be a champion within our program, because they understand the culture, the local market, they speak the language. So for us, it's important, really important to have that in place to start a program. Like you said, we are a global program. We're in 18 countries right now. In Europe, we are, besides the UK, in Ireland, in the Netherlands, in Germany. And we're also looking now at other countries like France and Italy to see if we can also add our program over there. And of course, besides WeConnect Europe, we also look in Europe to see how we can look at other minority groups. We're one of the supporters of MSD UK. On Friday, there's the EDLCC East Meets West conference, so we're also a big supporter of that one. And we're currently also looking at Disability In, which is currently still a US organization, to go and see in which countries we can also set up local chapters and affiliates.
Wow, so busy. You're all busy, and I know from working with you all that these programs do take a lot of effort and energy and drive. And what I want to come back to is that you made, Selena, about your role and really how across the board, how are your supplier diversity team structured in terms of whether there are dedicated staff in Europe? I mean, you've all said actually, our program started in the US and we're now doing activities here, but do you have dedicated staff in this region? Would you like to comment on that? And Megan, Timo,
sure.
Share what your structure looks like.
So we have two people focused on sustainability within our global supply chain. So that includes vendor diversity as well as sustainability. So the whole responsible and inclusive supply chain. And we both just happen to sit in the UK, as luck would have it. But we rely on a huge range of stakeholders. Meg talked about it earlier as well. In fact, everybody's talked about it. You rely on a really broad range of stakeholders to start to move the needle. And we've got people all around the world who help to advocate for more diverse vendors within our supply chain and drive the success. So obviously our strategic sourcing team, and we have a really strong partnership with them. We hold very regular meetings with them. We speak to someone in the strategic sourcing team, obviously, all the time about any needs that might be coming up and where there might be a tier 1 or a tier 2 opportunity for us to include diverse vendors. We also rely on vendor diversity champions. We've recently appointed vendor diversity champions within each of our key spend areas and are making them accountable for keeping their teams on the hook to ensure that when opportunities arise, diverse vendors are being given an opportunity. But we also leverage our affinity networks. So at Goldman Sachs, like many large organizations, there are many affinity networks for women, LGBT, disability, or veterans, or a whole range of affinity networks. And given these people are people who are passionate about diversity and inclusion, we leverage that passion to help drive forward our cause as well, and leverage them locally in different regions as well to help us, find out local intelligence about what might be happening on the ground. Within Goldman Sachs, obviously, we have a diversity and inclusion team. Again, regularly connect with them to drive awareness and support, ensure our efforts are being represented up to the board as well. And then we're also fortunate enough to have the Goldman Sachs 10,000 small business team, 10,000 women team, and Launch with GS team, who again we connect with super regularly to understand what diverse businesses might they have come across who could be of interest to us for our supply chain. And then, you know, like I'm sure the vast majority of us here on this panel, senior support. So, right from the chairman and CEO, David Solomon, who, talks passionately about diversity and inclusion. And so thankfully, as a firm, it's part of our culture. And so at least we don't have to spend time convincing people about why this is the right thing to do.
Fantastic. So very much a collaborative push. Timo, how is your supplier diversity team structured within Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah, so thanks, Maggie. Yeah, I guess firstly at a corporate level, we're part of our procurement or global procurement organization. So, we have an organization called Procurement Citizenship, in which our supplier diversity program is one of the key pillars. Our group's responsible for sort of setting the infrastructure, strategy, the infrastructure that makes the program happen. Everything from tracking tools, goals, objectives, everything that's actually needed to be successful. 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to join this team from a category management role. It was the first time that J&J had actually put dedicated resources into supporting the program outside the United States. So it was quite a bold commitment from our organization to make a difference around supplier diversity. I will say there's a huge amount of low-hanging fruit and opportunity outside the US. In 20 years in the US, a lot of the work's been done. Outside the US, this is very new space. So it certainly worked for us. Just last year we doubled our spend with diverse providers. I think it's important to say though, our category management teams are, they're really the ones responsible for delivery of the goals. We're a COE. We're there to enable the success of the category teams. Locally, we have regional supply diversity teams, and then we have priority market leads as well. So in Europe, our priority markets are the UK, South Africa, and Belgium. So they're really responsible for leading the programs in the local markets. We do, unlike some others, our program is different in different markets. So I would say consistently globally, we work with women-owned businesses, but we do have certain diversity causes that we champion in certain markets, like social enterprises in the UK. So this brings some local complexity to our program, hence the need for these local representatives. I think my last point really is that, we do rely on passionate category management folks around the world who do spend an awful lot of their time working on this. So we do make sure that our leadership know that we look at about 20% of someone's day job. If you're going to be a country lead around supply diversity, needs to be dedicated to that program. So it's time needs to be set aside to do this, and we can't just be relying on people doing this in any kind of hobbyistic manner. It needs to be something that time's been allocated to do successfully.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Meg, I'm going to come to you next. Your role, as your job title says, your role is split between strategic sourcing and supplier diversity. How is your team structured within Intel?
Yeah, so supplier diversity actually, like Selena and Timo, sit under supply chain sustainability. And in the US, we have 3 heads, full-time heads doing this. Outside the US, I spend about 50% of my time, maybe a little more, maybe a little less, depending on the day, on supplier diversity in the international space. And then in each country, we have a country lead and we have champions by business unit. And then along with that, we also have business unit or the spends group. They have their own champion as well, which drive towards goals that we set, because what you can't measure, you're not going to achieve, right? So we've set goals for each area, and then they help drive that within their procurement teams. And then we have an MRC, so we have a senior executive leader who is the sponsor. And we have the MRC where we take in our results every quarter and we discuss challenges, what we've achieved, any help needed with them, and then all the way up to the CEO. Diversity and inclusion is part of our DNA. And Bob Swan is just, he was one of the first CEOs to put out about the whole diversity issue that we've got in the US right now. So he's had a big speech about that too.
Right, fantastic. So that definitely that top level commitment. And when you talk about the country leads, have they got dedicated time? So Timo mentioned about 20% of a role.
Yeah.
You know, have they got dedicated time around this is part of their objectives? It's not just an add-on.
It's part of their objectives, and they're all very passionate about it. I think if you don't have the passion, you're not going to be able to drive it. So you need to choose those country leads and those business unit leads who have got the passion, so they can help drive it.
Brilliant, thank you. And thinking about countries, Peter, you mentioned, I think you said the Extensors Programme's in 18 countries around the world, but if we look in Europe, and I'll come to all of you actually just very high level, say which are the core country focuses, if that's the right word, in Europe. Obviously there's multiple countries in Europe, there's multiple countries in the EU, there's the UK, but which are your, where your current supplier strategy around this is focused? So Peter, for Accenture, I think you mentioned obviously about the UK market, and I know from conversations with you that you're hoping to launch the diverse supplier development program in Germany later this year, fingers crossed. Any other insight you can share about the locations?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, our main countries at the moment are the United Kingdom and Germany. Besides that, it's Ireland, Netherlands, and we're also looking to see how we can start our program in France together with WeConnect International as well. But like you said, one of our key elements of our program is our diverse supply development program, our mentoring and training program. We're currently running that in the UK for a few years now. We want to expand that to Germany as well, because we see that as a very successful and impactful part of our program. Yeah. So these are the countries where we are right now. So in Germany, in the UK, we're planning to continue or start our DSDP program, also to diversify our scope. And I touched on it earlier to see, can we also, besides women-owned businesses, also look at other minority-owned businesses, LGBT, ethnic minority-owned or disability-owned in those countries, but to really look at what's important in those countries. Is there a certain government focus in countries? We see in France, for instance, there's a big focus on persons with disabilities, but also ethnic minorities, looking at the banlieues. So that's how we cater our program, because that's where we see we can make the most impact. That's what's important in the local market. Yeah. So these are the countries where we try to grow the program.
Brilliant, thank you. And Timo, I know that you mentioned the UK and Belgium, and I think you said South Africa, which is in the wider EMEA region. Are there other? The reason I'm asking about countries is for folk who are listening in to understand that actually many of the corporations that we work with do choose specific countries to target, and I very loud and clear about follow the money where you're buying things. So I know for Johnson & Johnson, so you said UK and Belgium. Any other insight into the how you're selecting the countries where you're focusing your efforts in Europe?
Yeah. No, thanks, Maggie. I'd say we work everywhere, so we would never turn down a diverse supplier in any market. So that's step one. But there are certain markets where we have spend, we have procurement feet on the ground, we have legislation, an interest to do this. So and when we looked at this, I think we were very cautious about, especially when my role was created, that we didn't set out to boil the ocean, because we'd never be successful. So we were quite strategic in where we decided to put our resources and our efforts. We will grow that approach with time. So, for instance, if we find, I always say this is a bit like detective work. So we're often, we might discover a certain government or there's legislation in a certain market around something around supply diversity. So at the moment, we're having conversations around, India. There's a very interesting dynamic in India around small and micro business. So is that something that we need to focus in on? So we need to be agile in how we work around this. And the funny thing is, there's no sort of there's not always a playbook that you can go and pick up. I do an awful lot of research and fact finding and detective work to try and work out what on earth is going on out there, which makes it great fun. But it's so we're always learning, we're always looking for opportunity. But it's certainly a fun space if anybody's looking to get involved in it.
Yep, I always describe my job as never dull. It's never dull. Selena, what about from a Goldman's perspective? How are you choosing, where to focus your strategic efforts?
So again, I think sort of going back to one of the previous points, because our sourcing teams sit predominantly in New Jersey, London, Singapore, and buy on behalf of the globe, we try to keep it simple, which is, the guidelines are simple. If you're buying on behalf of any office, any goods or services, you have got to basically give me a good reason why you're not going to include a diverse vendor. If we've decided that that category of spend warrants examination, and we've gone through the opportunities with you, then we have a list of vendor diversity requirements as well as sustainability requirements more holistically that people have to adhere to. And so within EMEA, it is really London, Germany, France, Poland, where we have our biggest presence. But as I said, offices all around EMEA, and same guidelines, broadly speaking, apply.
Brilliant. And Meg, I'm gonna shift to a slightly different point next. You mentioned a few moments ago about you need to be able to track and measure success. So which we all know what gets measured gets done. But can you share any insight into what do you measure within the program? Is it just spend? Is it other elements? And what are you tracking to show the outcomes of all of the efforts?
So predominantly, I believe it's spend, because we do have a spend goal, and we just released our CSR report, and we hit our $1 billion goal that we set out 4 years ago. We hit 1.2 billion last year, so a year early. And then we also sign up to other goals, along with like what Accenture has done and J&J, and we signed up to the Global Citizen Award, and we hit that as well 8 months early. So we're at $279 million in spend out with women outside the US. So spending is a big part of what we set up and measure. But besides that, we also look at the different tiers. So we set goals for tier 1, tier 2, tier 2 being our suppliers' diversity spend. We also look internally, making sure that we do have at least one diverse supplier in every RFP, so that gets measured. So there are a number of different things that we measure, but I'd say spend is predominantly the measurement.
Great. And any other comments on what you're tracking across programs, either from Selena, Timo, or Peter?
One thing I would just add to that, where Meg's talking about, the tracking and just sort of building into your broader supplier strategy, and Meg touched upon tier 1, tier 2, and that's very much an approach that we take as well, sitting down with the strategic sourcing team and understanding where the tier 1 opportunities are versus the tier 2. Tier 1, making sure that you include the diverse vendor in your RFPs, track that to ensure that it's happening, and tier 2 saying, okay, therefore, if there's not a tier 1 opportunity, then going out to your master vendors and ensuring that they are considering small and diverse vendors as part of any subcontracting that they might be doing. And so I would say another part of that, we also track introductory meetings. So we're very keen to ensure that our sourcing teams start early in the process, because often one of the concerns that people can have using smaller diverse vendors is that they don't know them. They maybe have concerns that they won't be able to deliver. And so what we want to do is build up that level of confidence in the capabilities of small and diverse vendors far enough in advance so that by the time an opportunity comes up to actually buy goods and services, they have already got to know some diverse businesses along the journey, and then they're front of mind whenever the sourcing opportunity arises. So we actually also track that. How many introductory meetings have we been able to hold with our buyers each month? And then every month we sit down and we review that with them as well. So it's a good way of, building up that awareness, that knowledge, that level of comfort as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice, actually, rather than suppliers coming in right at the last minute when the RFP's, pretty much ready to be published and who you have.
Right. Yeah.
And certainly, that is one of the services that we provide at WeConnect International. We're constantly making connections. It's in the name, WeConnect, and we are constantly trying to enable the corporations that we work with to grow and build relationships with the women-owned businesses who, as I said earlier, who could be potential future suppliers. So I think that's a really important and very pragmatic step within, enabling more and more connections. So there can be ultimately more spend to track at the end of the day, which is fantastic. Timo, if I could come to you, what are maybe some of the key challenges that you've experienced in the Europe market around supply chain inclusion, maybe that's different from other regions. I mean, as you said earlier, there's not a legislative framework like there is in the US, but anything that you can shine a light on, maybe for others, so that they know that they're experiencing similar things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd describe them as internal and external. So, being internally, we talk about this is very new space. So, you need passion from the people that want to work on this program. That gets you started. But then what you also need is it's the dull stuff. It's the processes, be that your sourcing processes, it's accurate data. So you're measuring, true success. It's budgets to work with organizations like WeConnect, it's goals, it's all that stuff that needs to be happening to, that infrastructure that needs to be built out. And then I would say there's an element of change management too. We need to demonstrate the business case for doing this. I think that's really important. We need to take this away from being just a procurement initiative. It's not just about delivering numbers, it's about delivering economic and societal impact. It's about changing lives. Be that for women-owned businesses or disadvantaged groups in our society who are not afforded the opportunity that many are. So there's a change element in there too. There's some head, there's some heart as well, and I'm a firm believer on you need to pull on the heartstrings, especially in the early stages of doing this. And then, externally, we still often struggle to find enough diverse providers. That's why organisations like WeConnect are so important to us. And WeConnect for us are the backbone of our supplier diversity program. You're present in so many markets around the world where we work. So when we're looking for suppliers, we know where to go. You're our first point of entry, our first point of contact. So, I'd say, absolutely vitally important that you've got these advocacy partners like WeConnect out there to support you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Timo. And yes, I know within my team here in Europe, we spend a lot of time doing that, looking to identify relevant suppliers that we think if we put them in front of, say, an Intel or an IBM or who, that there's gonna be interest from the teams. And if I'm just going to say, please, to the audience, if you've got questions that you'd like to ask, I've got a couple more questions that I'm going to ask the panel, but we are then going to open the floor to questions. So please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions, and Brittany's going to be looking out for them. So please do ask away. If there's things you'd like to ask, this is a brilliant forum to ask them. We've got 4 amazing panelists with bags of experience that they can share with you. Peter, what would be one key piece of advice that you would share with a company that's just starting out on their European efforts?
Yes, and I think some of those points have already been made about building a program in a country. I think again, follow the money. Really look at where can you make the most impact. Of course, like Timo said, we're never turning down a good supplier or a diverse supplier in any country. But if you really want to build a program, really look at, where is our company base? Where do we have our supply chain? Where can we make a difference? Do I have people on the ground that can help me, be my ally? Leadership commitment is very important. We're very fortunate to have our CPO. We report directly in our CPO in Europe, and he's super passionate about our program. So leadership support is very important on that as well. So I said impact. But also, like again, organizations like yourself, WeConnect International, if they are on the ground in a country, that makes such a huge difference, because they already know the market as well. They know what kind of suppliers are out there. They can help you find the right kind of businesses, but they can also do the advocacy for you. Somebody like Maggie is always very helpful and really willing to get on a call with your colleagues and just share, what is supplier diversity about? How can WeConnect International help you find those innovative businesses? And also explain that, it's not a program that's positive discrimination. We're not hiring a women-owned business or an LGBT-owned business because they are diverse. No, we hire them because they are an innovative business that can help you with your sourcing solution. So that kind of advocacy, having that there is super important as well. So these are one of the things that you really should look at. And building that right kind of infrastructure. And of course, you can always ask us. We're not just here telling you our stories on our panel. You can always reach out to us directly, and we are always happy to help you and share with you our challenges that we have overcome, so you won't have to.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Peter. And I know certainly from a WeConnect perspective, myself and the team, we're always happy to talk about this program, but I do think it's incredibly important for procurement colleagues to talk to peers in other organizations and have a procurement to procurement conversation. I think that's one of the brilliant things within this network. It is a community and we do share, and I certainly call upon many of you often to have conversations with either with people who are just coming to the program from within a corporate member, or actually are new to the discussion, generally. Meg, what might be some of your key advice to share for organisations just starting to think about it in a European context?
Well, I think Peter's covered most of it. So I think, again, don't boil the ocean. Choose one place to start. Really make sure that you've got the right people there to support you, whether that's senior management, because they help drive the program, making sure that people send out the RFPs, and include those diverse suppliers into the program. And really, I think a big win is to connect with the NGOs like yourself, Maggie, and MSD UK and NLG, well, the ELGCC here.
EGLCC.
Yeah, because that's where our source for diverse suppliers comes from, right? So, and any supplier that Intel could use, I'm sure Accenture could use, and anyone that Team or Selena could use, we could use. So I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's certainly one of the things we want to shine a spotlight. If they're working well with one, we'd love to be able to connect them to others so they can broaden their client base. Selena, what about for you? What's some of your key advice?
Yeah, well, I mean, I completely agree with what's been said as well. And I would just reinforce that point that an organisation like WeConnect is fantastic to help us all connect with each other, because I know I've spoken to many of you who I'm seeing on the panel today about, what's worked well for you. And we regularly speak with peers so that we can understand, which vendors work really well, which areas of spend they've had most successes with. I mean, this isn't sharing competitive advantage, this is moving the needle. And we all, being passionate diversity and inclusion professionals, all want to move the needle in the right direction, so that's really good. But back to advice for people starting out, I'd say, get the local sponsorship, as Meg talked about. Make sure you've got somebody on the ground who's actually going to champion this for you. Try to get a couple of small wins in there at the outset so that people can start to see the benefits. You try to understand that you might be working with diverse vendors already in those markets, you just didn't realize they were diverse. So to the extent that you are, start, promoting those ones amongst, those offices as well, introducing them to other people in the business. And before you know it, you're starting up to build up more of a knowledge of that particular area, and you can start to open the doors as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that's, that's incredibly important around, I often say to our women-owned businesses, if you've already got a relationship with one of our corporate members, let's see if we can help you to build a relationship with a different division in a different department, because if you're already doing well there, then hopefully we can help you with more. Timo, what about you? Well, from a J&J perspective, in the last couple of years, have you been doing this role? I mean, obviously J&J have been working with WeConnect for a while, but you've been in this role for a couple of years now. What have been some of the kind of key learnings for you, then the top advice you'd share? Oh, Timo, I've lost your volume.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, sorry, a bit of a microphone issue. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's certainly worked for us is loads of great advice. One thing I'd probably add to that is focus on impact. So that could be creating jobs for people who are furthest from the jobs market. If you think of all the spend that's sat in this virtual room, we've got an opportunity to change the world here through our procurement spend, through supporting, getting women-owned businesses to get more than that 1%, that measly 1% of corporate spend. What we can also do, some of the stories that we've also focused on telling, which drives advocacy and engagement, is around, our diverse and inclusive supply base is supporting people with autism, who would not get jobs if it wasn't for our spend. Through our work with suppliers, we support women entrepreneurs in Africa, which puts food on the table for families. Yeah. We have suppliers who employ people solely with mental health issues who would struggle to find work if it wasn't for what we do with them. So all of this helps build engagement, it builds advocacy. We've got numerous stories of women-owned businesses as well all around the world, and the impact that we're making on lives, but also those businesses are making on us. and how they're making us work and think differently and be a better company through their insights. So I always laugh, your procurement, you can actually change the world. We've got so much money. We've got so much money that we're looking after, much more than any CSR budget of any corporation. So you can make a difference. You can probably do more, and you can do a lot more in your job than you probably can through charitable giving. So do consider that. Think about how you can actually make lives better and how you can change the world.
Fantastic, thank you, Timo. Brittany, I'm going to come to you now to ask if there's been any questions that the audience have asked that we can share with the panel. I do still have a few more, but I'd like to make sure that there's plenty of time for the audience to ask. So Brittany, are there any questions that have come through?
Sure, we have quite a few questions that have come through actually. So we'll start with the first question, and you just let me know when you want to switch back to the panel. But the first question we have from Natalie DeVries is there a universal definition of diversified spend / minority suppliers?
Great, so we'll take that one. So I think if we deal with a definition specifically about diverse suppliers, and then we can come to the spend. I can answer it, but would anybody like to share their definition? Meg, how would you the definition of diverse suppliers that Intel uses?
So at Intel we use 51% owned, operated, and controlled, which is what is basically out there in the universe, I guess. Yeah. And we look at, from a minority perspective, outside the US, in every country, minorities are different, right? So whether you are in South Africa or Israel or here, we've got programs in all those countries, the minority is generally different. So we look at women, minority, LGBTQ, and disabilities.
But for any region, if you were able to identify those businesses in any region, it would be a business that is majority owned by that characteristic or that group. Yeah,
correct.
And is that different for anybody, for Goldman's or J&J or Accenture, that it's majority ownership? I'm seeing some nods.
Yeah, majority owned, controlled led. Yeah, and I know in South Africa, I think the government keeps 30%. But yeah, our definition is the same, as would make sense.
Yep, absolutely. And then there was a second question about spend. And I know for some of the corporations we work with, they only count certified spend. Some count spend where the businesses have self-identified as being diverse. I don't know if anybody would like to make any comments just briefly on that around the spend that you're tracking. Meg, is your goal, the goal that you mentioned, is that certified spend only?
Certified spend, and when you look at tier 2, it's direct spend. So when I say direct spend, it means that they can tie it back to a purchase order that we have raised to pay them.
Perfect. Any other comments, Selena or Timo or Peter, around how you're tracking whether that's certified or self-declared spend?
Well, especially for our external reporting, we look at certified businesses. That's also will always be our main focus. We do also track self-registered, but we do encourage those businesses also to certify.
Yeah, brilliant. Super, thank you. Brittany, is there another question from the audience that you'd like to share?
Sure. So as an average, what is the scale / number of suppliers that you are managing within this program, within your program in Europe? And this is from Paul White.
Scale, percentage scale. I don't know whether any of you will have a specific number. Anything that you can.
Yeah,
I don't know about specific numbers, Paul, I'm afraid.
What says as an average? Do you have an average maybe? It says as an average, what is the scale / number of suppliers that you are managing within your program within Europe?
I don't know. Interesting question. I wonder whether
I'm guessing that's diverse, right? Sorry, Maggie. That's diverse suppliers, right? I couldn't.
No. What are any of you? Have any of you got maybe that's been published in CSR reports or specific percentage of your spend? Or Meg, I mean, obviously you shared that Intel have reached their goal, but can any of the Goldman's or J&J or Accenture, do you have a non-US, I'm going to say non-US because I don't know if you'll have one specific for Europe, a percentage spend that's with diverse suppliers or anything like that that you might be able to share? And you might not, because I know the stats and data is different everywhere.
Yeah. That's right. We have a public goal, so well, 2 public goals on vendor diversity. So again, because I came into the role towards the end of 2016, and so I'd say the strategic focus has really only been there for the past couple of years. But the goals are to publish our numbers next year for the first time, and then to increase the numbers by 50% by 2025. So whatever numbers we report next year, again being certified spend, similar to others, then the target for us is to increase that by 50% by 2025. But those are the only numbers that we've got out there right now.
Great, fantastic. So I think the numbers and specific percentages can be quite challenging. But Timo or Peter, any comment from your organisations?
I mean, so I'd probably again say in the US, the program's been around for such a long time. I mean, in the US, we do have a target that we have a document called Health for Humanity, which you can Google if you're interested. But our goal for our US supply diversity program is to better a benchmark. And I think we're running at about 11 or 12% of our current spend in the United States is with diverse providers. And I think where we would like to go, and outside the US, of course, is to try and mirror some of the best practices from the US, but we are still a long way off there, both in percentages, but also the means to measure that. So I think that's the important thing to consider here. So maybe I'm hoping it won't take us 20 years to get to where the US is, but we want to change, we want to make change and impact, but it's we're still in the early stages here.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that is one of the challenges around having the data available. And I think, Meg, that's why it's, as you were talking about the tracking and the measurement and what you're doing, so that within your organizations you can even if they're not necessarily figures that are published externally. Brittany, are there any more questions from the audience?
Yes, we actually have a question that is specifically for Timo, and this is from Paul White as well. It says, Timo mentioned legislation in the country of Europe. Other than the UK, have you experienced legislation restrictions which are a blocker to collecting this data, i.e. you are not allowed to ask questions about someone's age, gender, orientation, if their class themselves are disabled?
Yeah, and I think, Maggie, you may be just as well placed to answer this question, because so one of the things we're currently doing at the moment is we're about to launch a survey of our existing supply base to actually find out, do we have hidden diversity there that we just don't know about? Because I think of any corporation, a bit like J&J, we have literally tens of thousands of suppliers that, the strategic suppliers we know we know everything about, but on some of our smaller suppliers, our knowledge is not quite where it would need to be. So we're launching this. From our perspective, we hear this as often as a comment that's made to stop us asking that question, stop us bringing the program forward. But we've not come across legal requirements to stop us from asking that question. Again, we're not positively discriminating here. I mean, I think that's been called out many times before, but there's nothing holding us back asking that question. If a supplier chooses not to declare it, that's also absolutely fine. But and Maggie, I think you could probably talk about some of the work that you guys have done to try and answer this question.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's exactly that. As long as the question isn't mandatory and there's a prefer not to say option, it's that's what we would say. I mean, as long as it's not being used in the legal review that we've had done actually this year, which was specifically looking at legal scenario in France. Actually, it covers European law. Is these, as long as it's not being used to automatically select a supplier based on this, then it's fine to ask these questions with the prefer not to say option. We do often hear this is a blocker that comes up from legal departments to almost stop things getting off the ground. You can also use organisations like a WeConnect or an MSD UK to verify and look at data and understand who you've already got. So there are ways, there are ways to do it. And what we recommend is that two things, maybe as you're running RFPs that you ask some of these questions, or as you're onboarding you ask the questions, but also Timo says like what you're doing, looking back and saying, right, you're already part of our supply chain, do you meet, or are you any of these, but you don't have to say if you don't want to. So what we haven't seen in Europe, and what we do hope will come, is there to be a specific focus from governments around specifically buying from diverse and underrepresented groups. In the UK, we definitely see that focus around SMEs, and the UK government with this spend goal of about a third with SMEs. Great. In that, could we see a specific focus on buying from diverse businesses within it? Any other comments on the legal piece, Peter or Meg? No. Certainly, you're welcome to follow up with me separately about that. We've got some. I'm sure we can share some background information. Brittany, any further questions?
Yes, you guys are doing an excellent job. There are plenty of questions rolling in. We have another question from Adam Rubenfield. He wants to know, how much do you rely on policy changes, i.e. the must do, versus the passion for this subject, i.e. the feels good, when convincing your purchasing/category managers to purchase from women-owned businesses? Good question.
Great question. And I'm going to say that the policy is, say, an internal policy rather than, say, a government policy, but I guess that's winning the hearts and minds, right? And we touched on this very briefly earlier in the discussion around, as you're bringing on your champions and bringing the rest of your team and your buying teams with you on this journey. Yeah, any insight you can share around that kind of, this is the rule, this is a good thing to do. Any insight anybody would like to share?
I would just add to that. So, we as yet don't have a procurement policy. It's something that we are actively debating, but certainly we have got the guidance out there that everyone in the strategic sourcing team understands, which is that they have to include a diverse vendor for all of the RFPs. And we, as I said, communicate frequently with the team. We're also enhancing our systems, and a lot of people have talked about tracking and reporting, etc. So again, our systems are being enhanced so that we can get systems-driven information that will tell us that that's the number of RFPs that went out, and that's the number that had diverse vendors in there as well. So, I guess in the absence of a policy, you can always revert to some sort of tracking system to get the data that you need, and use that in order to, help provide insights into what's happening and what might not be happening. But I think ultimately, if you can get people to buy into why this is important, and all of the reasons that Timo talked about earlier, this is not just because we feel passionate about it, but it's because there are lots of good business reasons why you would want to do this. Small and diverse vendors are often very entrepreneurial. They can react very well to any changing requirements that you might have. There's a misconception that they're going to be more expensive because they don't have economies of scale. That's often not the case, because actually they might not have huge overheads. So there are loads of reasons why to win the hearts and minds, as well as just saying we know that even as an organization, we know that our employees care about this. They care that we're opening doors, and so even to recruit talent into our organization, this is important for us as well. And also we know that having a diverse supply chain, as talked about previously, is going to bring diverse perspectives, and therefore you're going to be able to get more creative and creative solutions that are going to meet a broader range of customer needs. So many good business reasons over and beyond, just needing a policy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we see within the WeConnect community is, we have amazing women-owned businesses registered with us, and actually their defining characteristic is that they're a brilliant supplier, expert in whatever they do, rather than the fact that they're a women-owned business. Their defining characteristic is the capability that they bring to the table. Brittany, so we're into the last few minutes, so I just want to ask if there's any more. We'll move on to a couple more questions if there are some more from the audience.
Okay, we have another question that is actually directed to you directly, Selena. And so it says, and this is from Susan too. It says, you mentioned guidelines that you expect buyers to follow regarding D&I. Are you able to share what they include, what those guidelines include?
The guidelines, So the guidelines are very much that, you know, if we have gone through your spend category at the beginning of the year, which we do with all of the strategic sourcing team, and we have agreed that there are opportunities, tier one opportunities in your spend category, and you're going out to bid, then you must include a diverse vendor. It's that simple, you know. So, and then on a monthly basis, we meet with them, we sit down, and we see if that's been happening, and if they haven't been able to find diverse vendors, just understanding what were the challenges, or equally if they've taken a diverse vendor to a certain part in the RFP process, but the diverse vendor wasn't successful. Again, understanding, digging a bit deeper, going, well, why weren't they successful? Is it something that we need to consider changing our processes or doing something differently in order to enable them to be successful? And one of the things that we had discovered, again, back to this, to the point we touched upon earlier about making these introductory meetings, we had recognized that in the early days of starting this, that sometimes when we were making these introductory meetings, we had not done a good enough job at briefing the diverse vendor on what the strategic sourcing team would want to know. And so we ended up, you know, connecting with the diverse vendor in advance, saying, here are the sorts of things that they would want to know that's specific to that category of spend, or indeed having a prep call with them saying, here's what you need to come in to talk about. And by the way, it's a 30-minute meeting. You're probably going to have 20 minutes to talk by the time everybody's joined and done their introductions. And so you got to sell yourself in 20 minutes. And I think just, you know, helping people understand the process that we'd go through really it ensures, it tries to help the success.
Yeah. And I'm just going to echo, we had something happen this week with a couple of our diverse businesses that had gone into an RFP process, and what I was able to share with the court members, like the importance of sharing the feedback about what was happening and why, so that the next time they come into play, that they've learned, you know, they've learned everything, not just simply that, oh, well, they participated and you know, maybe that they didn't get to the next stage, but it's like, why didn't they, and what could they do for next time round? And I think many of the organizations we work with, as well as looking at this from a purely, you know, the procurement piece, there is also an element around the development of the diverse suppliers as well, and helping them, you know, learn from each process, so that the next time they're going to come back and hopefully be more successful the next time. Okay, Brittany, I'm going to go. We've got time for one more question before we wrap up. So Brittany, if you've got any more questions from the audience, please let me know.
Okay, there are plenty more, but I'm going to go with this one because I think this is something that all of our attendees would like to hear. It says, can you recommend any tools to baseline, track, and measure supplier diversity and inclusion from a data point of view?
Okay, so baselining. I don't know who would like to answer, if they've got any tools that they can share. Peter, any insight from an Accenture perspective?
Maybe not existing, but there are companies out there that can help you register your diverse suppliers. I think CVM is one. We're using Connexus right now. So businesses can register themselves as a diverse supplier in a certain tool. They can go to a portal for Accenture, and that's how we get to find out, you know, what kind of businesses are out there and what kind of certifications they have, like we Connect International certification. So yeah, these are the companies that we use. Yeah, I think that's it for us.
Great.
Yeah, we
Timo,
use similar ones.
Sorry,
so we use Connexus as well, and then Excel spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Timo, any insight from a J&J perspective around the data points?
We spend a lot of time reviewing our own internal data, and you know, so when you look at your existing, you know, it's sometimes a depressing fact if you take your existing diverse spend and divide it by how much spend you've got, look at that percentage, and then consider, are you doing enough? So we do. I think we use our own internal data. I mean, from the US, there are various companies like CVM. There's quite good benchmarking out there, but it doesn't always quite work outside the US, unfortunately. So again, we rely on folks like, you know, WeConnect and MSD UK as well to try and help us out as well. So yeah, it's a great question. I would say we don't have a huge amount at the moment. I think we're relying a little bit on our own sometimes limited brain power as well.
Brilliant. So I'm gonna ask very briefly, and this isn't anything that we've asked before, but and then I'm gonna close, and I'm just gonna close on 2 upcoming events that we have within the WeConnect international community. Really high level, just you know, just a few seconds each. What's the most what's the thing that you like most about your job and working in supply chain inclusion? I'm going to say for me at WeConnect, I'm inspired every day by some of the amazing business owners that we meet, the work they do, how they run their businesses, and for my role, connecting them, to these opportunities with our corporations is the thing that definitely brings a smile to my face. But just very briefly, what would you say, Peter? What do you like? What do you like the most about your role?
Well, definitely meeting all those amazing, innovative, diverse businesses. I've met so many already, and especially, we haven't touched on COVID this hour, and it flew by but some of these entrepreneurs, because it's very challenging for those kind of businesses as well, right, to deal with the current crisis. But sometimes you see those entrepreneurs who are really able to change their business and focus on producing services and products that cater to our needs in this crisis. There's one business very quickly that changed its business model into producing face masks made from renewable recycled clothing, and then using people are out of a job because of the crisis to make them so that they can also generate income there. So those kind of businesses, they inspire me every day, and that's what I love about my job. That's why I'm so happy it's my day job.
Fantastic.
As well.
Timo, what would you say from a J&J perspective?
I'd say I mean, having come out of a category role and worked in procurement for many years, I often think supply diversity, we can impact lives, and it sometimes feels like the antidote to some of the less pleasant parts of procurement. So that's what I love about it. It does make you feel good about what you do. So give it a chance.
Brilliant. Selena, what about you?
Yeah, it's similar to what's been said before. Our jobs really have an impact. So we do a job that has a really positive impact on society and on the economy. We know that small and diverse businesses, if you spend time on them, they pay it forward into their communities, and that drives a much healthier society and economy. So, how could you not feel good about that, particularly in times like this? It's something that definitely inspires me to want to keep going.
Fantastic. And Meg, final word to you on this.
I just think it's making a difference, right? You're not taking, which often procurement can be seen to do. You're actually giving something back. And to everybody's point, it's a cool place to work, and you meet all these amazing suppliers. You make a difference in society and the world. It's really cool.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So please join me in thanking our four panelists, Meg, Selena, Timo, and Peter. Thank you to you all for your questions. I am aware that there are many questions that we didn't get to. So what I will say is, Brittany, we'll collate the questions and I'll try and see if we can get some answers for them and out to people in the next week or so. But if you could just go to the next slide for me, I just want to share that on the 22nd of June, so that is a week on Monday, we are hosting our WeConnect International Day. This is a global virtual online event. We're bringing together women-owned businesses from around the world. Please check it out. You can find the details on our website. And if this webinar has been helpful, if you can go to the next slide, on the 23rd of July, I think is the date that Michael had said, we are running a similar session but focused on supplier diversity inclusion in the Asia Pac region. So I'll certainly be sharing that with the network here, but please, the details are available online, and you can please share them with colleagues or with tier 1 suppliers or other procurement peers that who would be interested in a similar discussion, but for the Asia Pac region. But thank you very much, everybody, for participating and for all the questions. And I'm sorry we weren't able to answer all of them, but we will do our best to have a look at them after the event. And please don't hesitate to get in touch with the WeConnect International team if there's anything that we can assist you with in this space, either here in Europe or globally. We do work in many different countries around the world. But thank you very much, everybody, and I hope this has been very helpful for you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.